The first day at the school began like any other, with the bell ringing and students rushing through the gates, laughing, talking, and complaining about classes. Among them was a new girl walking quietly with her bag held close to her side. She moved slowly, not because she was unsure, but because she didn't want attention. Her eyes stayed forward, her face calm, her steps steady. She had learned long ago that the best way to observe a place was to stay silent first. She had transferred from another city, and only the office staff knew much about her. Her records were clean. Her grades were good. Her behavior was marked as respectful and disciplined. There was nothing unusual on paper. No one would guess she came from a family that lived by strict values, where respect, self-control, and inner strength mattered more than showing off. In the classroom, students noticed her the moment she walked in. New faces were rare here, and when one appeared, everyone watched. Some whispered. Some stared openly. A few smiled out of politeness. She chose a seat near the window, placed her notebook on the desk, and sat straight, as if she had practiced that posture all her life. The teacher introduced her briefly and asked her to say a few words. She stood up, spoke her name softly, and said she hoped to get along with everyone. Her voice was calm, not shaky, but not loud either. She sat back down before anyone could ask questions. That was it. No drama, no story, just a simple introduction. During the break, groups formed as usual. Some students gathered around lockers, others around phones. The new girl stayed by herself, eating a small snack and looking outside. That was when a group of loud students noticed her. They were known for running the halls, for laughing too loudly, for deciding who belonged and who didn't. They looked at her clothes, her quiet nature, and her silence, and made a quick judgment. One of them walked past her desk and made a comment that wasn't meant to be friendly. She didn't react. Another one laughed. Someone else whispered something cruel. Still, she kept her eyes on the window. To them, her silence looked like fear. To her, it was patience. Throughout the day, small things kept happening. A notebook was pushed off her desk. Someone blocked her path in the hallway. A laugh followed her when she walked by. None of it was loud enough for teachers to notice, but loud enough for her to hear. She noticed everything. The tone, the timing, the faces. What they didn't know was that she had been taught to stay calm under pressure. She had grown up around people who believed that strength showed itself best when it was controlled. She had been told many times that reacting too quickly only gave power to the wrong people. At lunch, she sat alone again. A few students watched her from a distance, curious but unsure. One girl almost walked over, then stopped when she saw the group of bullies nearby. The new girl noticed that too. She didn't blame anyone. Fear spreads quietly. When the final bell rang, she packed her bag neatly and walked out without rushing. Outside the school, a simple car waited. No crowd, no bodyguards. Just a calm ride home. As she sat in the back seat, she finally allowed herself a slow breath. The day had gone exactly as she expected. At home, her guardian asked how school was. She answered with a small smile and said it was fine. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for help. She knew this was only the beginning. Places like that always tested new people first. That night, she prepared her bag for the next day with care. She looked at herself in the mirror, not with doubt, but with quiet confidence. She knew who she was. She knew where she came from. And she knew that no matter what happened next, she would not lose control. At school, the bullies talked about her again, laughing and planning how to get a reaction next time. To them, she was just a quiet new girl who didn't fight back. They had no idea how wrong they were. The next morning, the new girl returned to school the same way she had the day before. Calm steps, straight posture, quiet focus. Nothing about her showed worry or fear. But inside, she was alert. She understood patterns. She knew that people who tested limits once would try again, harder the next time. As she walked through the gate, eyes followed her. Some curious, some amused, some already judging. The group from the day before stood near the entrance, pretending not to notice her while watching her every move. They whispered and laughed, confident that the day belonged to them. In class, she listened carefully, took notes neatly, and answered when asked. Her answers were clear and respectful. A few students began to notice she wasn't slow or confused like the rumors suggested. She understood lessons quickly. She didn't show off, but she didn't hide her intelligence either. During the first break, the tension returned. A chair was pulled out just as she was about to sit. She caught herself before falling and calmly moved to another seat. Laughter followed. She didn't react. That silence annoyed them more than anger ever could. One of the louder students leaned close and said something meant to embarrass her. The words were sharp, personal, and cruel. A few nearby students froze, waiting to see what she would do. She slowly turned her head, looked at the speaker, and held eye contact for a moment. Not with fear, not with anger, just steady calm. Then she looked away. That moment confused them. Bullies expected tears, shouting, or fear. Calm made them uncomfortable. By lunchtime, the teasing grew bolder. Trays were bumped. Someone stepped deliberately into her path. A mocking apology followed. Teachers were busy. The hallway noise covered everything. She noticed how carefully they chose moments when adults were distracted. She sat at a corner table again, eating quietly. Across the room, a few students watched, clearly uncomfortable with what they saw, but unsure whether to step in. Silence filled the space where courage should have been. The group finally approached her table. They surrounded it loosely, not enough to cause a scene, but enough to make a point. One of them tapped the table with a finger and asked why she never spoke. She looked up and answered softly that she spoke when she had something worth saying. That response drew laughter, but it also shifted the air. The insult hadn't landed the way they expected. One of them leaned closer and told her she needed to learn how things worked at this school. Another said new people had to earn their place. She listened without interrupting. When they finished, she nodded once and went back to eating. That was when frustration turned into anger. Whispers spread quickly. By the end of the day, people were talking. Some said the new girl was strange. Others said she was brave. A few said she was stupid for not fighting back. Everyone agreed on one thing. Something was building. After school, she walked out again without rushing. The same car waited. Inside, she sat quietly, thinking. She wasn't afraid, but she was disappointed. Not at the bullies, at the bystanders. She had been taught that strength meant protecting others too. That evening, she trained quietly in her room. Simple movements, controlled breathing, nothing loud, nothing aggressive, just discipline, just focus. She didn't train to hurt people. She trained to stay in control if things went wrong. The next day, the atmosphere changed. The bullies no longer whispered. They spoke openly. Jokes were louder. Insults were clearer. They wanted a reaction before teachers stepped in. In the hallway between classes, one of them blocked her path fully this time. She stopped walking. Students gathered at a distance, pretending not to stare. Phones stayed hidden but ready. He leaned close and said she thought she was better than everyone. She answered calmly that she didn't think about that at all. That response pushed him over the edge. His voice rose. He called her names meant to shame her. People around them went silent. She took a slow breath. She remembered what she had been taught. Control first. Always. Another student stepped forward, lifting a hand as if to make a point. The gesture was sudden, aggressive, too far. Gasps filled the hallway. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She stood her ground, eyes steady, body still. The raised hand froze in the air. In that moment, something shifted. Not because of fear, but because of presence. A teacher's voice echoed from down the hall, breaking the tension. The group stepped back quickly, acting innocent. The crowd scattered. The moment passed, but the message was clear. That night, the bullies talked again, angrier than before. They felt challenged, embarrassed. They planned to end it the next day, away from teachers. Meanwhile, the new girl prepared quietly, not with fear, with clarity. She knew tomorrow would decide everything. She went to sleep early, calm and steady, unaware that the school would soon learn that silence did not mean weakness. The next day felt heavier the moment the school opened. The air was loud, but tense, like everyone sensed something was coming. The new girl walked in the same way she always did, calm and steady, but she noticed how eyes followed her more openly now. Whispers didn't bother to hide. Some students looked worried. Others looked excited, as if waiting for a show. She went to her first class and took her seat near the window. Sunlight fell across her desk. She opened her notebook and wrote the date carefully. Writing had always helped her stay focused. The lesson began, but few students were paying attention. More than one head turned toward the door, listening for footsteps in the hallway. During the break, she stayed inside the classroom. She had learned that moving around only gave others more chances. She watched clouds move slowly outside and reminded herself to breathe evenly. She was not here to prove anything. She was here to learn. The second break was different. As soon as the bell rang, voices grew louder than usual. Someone laughed too hard. Someone else said her name just loudly enough for her to hear. She stood up and walked into the hallway, her bag over her shoulder. Halfway down the hall, the path closed in front of her. The same group stood there, no longer pretending. They didn't whisper this time. They spoke openly, making sure people nearby could hear. A few students slowed down to watch. Some stepped back into classrooms. No one stepped forward. She stopped walking and waited. One of them asked if she was tired of acting quiet. Another said she was being disrespectful by ignoring everyone. The words were sharp, meant to cut, meant to break her calm. She answered in a steady voice that she didn't owe anyone noise to earn respect. That sentence landed harder than any insult. The mood shifted fast. Smiles disappeared. One of them stepped closer, invading her space. She didn't move back. She didn't raise her voice. She kept her hands relaxed at her sides, just like she had been taught. Someone behind them muttered that she needed to be taught a lesson. A hand lifted slightly, not enough yet to draw attention, but enough to threaten. The hallway went silent. Time seemed to slow. She could hear her own breathing. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and controlled. She knew this moment. She had imagined it before. She knew exactly what to do and what not to do. She looked straight at the raised hand, then at the face behind it. Her expression didn't change. No fear, no challenge, just calm certainty. That calm caused hesitation. A teacher's footsteps echoed from around the corner. The group broke apart quickly, laughing too loudly, pretending nothing had happened. The teacher passed by without noticing anything wrong. The new girl continued walking as if nothing had happened. But inside, she understood something important. This was no longer about teasing. They were looking for control. And control was something she would never give them. By lunchtime, the story had spread. Some students said she had stared someone down. Others said she was fearless. A few said she was reckless. No one knew the truth. She sat at her usual table. This time, someone sat across from her. Not a bully, just a quiet student who said they admired how calm she stayed. The new girl thanked them politely. That small moment mattered more than anyone realized. After lunch, the school was suddenly busy with visitors. A meeting had been called. Staff moved with purpose. Whispers turned into guesses. The new girl was asked to step into the office. Inside, the air was serious but respectful. She answered questions honestly. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't accuse. She simply explained what had been happening. Later that afternoon, a guardian arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just calm and firm. The way they spoke made staff listen closely. Papers were reviewed. Policies were mentioned. The mood shifted again. Students noticed something was different when the new girl returned to class. The bullies avoided her eyes. Confidence had cracked. That evening, news traveled beyond the school. Phone calls were made. Adults spoke quietly behind closed doors. The truth about her family began to surface, but not from her. From records. From connections. From careful checks. She returned home and followed her routine. Homework, dinner, quiet reflection. She didn't celebrate. She didn't relax too much. She knew consequences took time. The next morning, the school felt smaller, quieter. The group that once moved freely now stayed together, watching carefully. Teachers seemed more alert. Always felt safer. During class, the new girl was asked to read aloud. Her voice was clear, confident, no shaking. A few students smiled. Respect was starting to replace curiosity. Later, she passed the same hallway where everything had almost gone wrong. She didn't slow down. She didn't look around. She simply walked through, unbothered. Behind her, the bullies watched in silence. They were no longer sure who had the power. That day ended without drama. But everyone knew it wasn't over yet. The line had been crossed. And soon, the truth about who she really was would change everything. The change was noticeable the moment the new girl stepped into school that morning. The noise was still there, the laughter, the footsteps, the ringing bell, but something underneath had shifted. People were watching more carefully now. Teachers stood longer in hallways. Conversations stopped when certain students passed by. She walked through the gate calmly, her bag resting on one shoulder, her face relaxed. She could feel the difference without needing to look around. The pressure that once followed her had loosened, but it hadn't disappeared. In class, the group that once whispered and laughed now sat unusually quiet. They avoided eye contact. When the teacher asked questions, hands went up slower than usual. Everyone was cautious. During the first break, a message spread quietly from desk to desk. Meetings had been held the day before. Parents had been called. Warnings had been given. No one knew the full details, but everyone knew the school was taking the situation seriously. The new girl stayed near the window again, as she always did. A few students passed by and gave her small nods. One offered a quick smile. These were small gestures, but they mattered. Later that morning, an announcement came over the speaker asking a few students to report to the office. The names were not spoken aloud in the hallway, but everyone knew who it was about. Chairs scraped the floor. Bags were picked up slowly. The confident walk from before was gone. The new girl remained in her seat, reading quietly. She wasn't interested in watching anyone struggle. She believed lessons meant more when learned privately. When lunchtime arrived, the cafeteria felt different too. The loud table near the back was quieter. The usual jokes were missing. Instead, there were hushed voices and nervous glances. Someone sat beside the new girl again, this time thanking her for speaking up earlier. They said it made others feel less alone. She listened carefully and said everyone deserved to feel safe. Nothing more. Nothing dramatic. In the afternoon, she was called to the office once more. This time, the mood was calmer, respectful. She answered questions again, the same way she had before. Clear, honest, balanced. A guardian was present again, speaking softly but firmly. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't demand anything unreasonable. They simply reminded the school of its responsibility to protect every student equally. Paperwork was signed. Plans were discussed. Boundaries were set. When she returned to class, students noticed how teachers treated her. Not with favoritism, but with care. With attention. That alone changed how others behaved. By the end of the day, the truth had reached the parents of the bullies. Calls were made at home. Conversations happened behind closed doors. The confidence built on intimidation began to crumble. That evening, the new girl returned home and followed her routine again. Dinner was simple. Conversation was light. She didn't talk much about school. She didn't need to. Later, she sat quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. She didn't feel proud. She didn't feel victorious. She felt calm. Calm meant she had stayed true to herself. The next day, consequences became visible. Seats were changed. Schedules were adjusted. Supervision increased. The group that once ruled the hallway now moved carefully, unsure of their place. One of them passed her in the corridor and looked away quickly. Another mumbled an apology without stopping. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Word had spread further now. Not just that she had stood her ground, but that she came from a family that valued discipline and respect deeply. People whispered about connections, about legacy, about strength. She never corrected them. She never confirmed anything. Her identity was not something she used as a shield. During class, the teacher asked for volunteers to help with a group activity. The room hesitated. Then someone suggested her name. Not because of fear, because of trust. She accepted quietly and worked with others without issue. No tension, no power plays, just cooperation. The school counselor visited classrooms later that week, talking about kindness, boundaries, and courage. Many students listened more closely than they ever had before. The bullies were no longer loud. They were no longer leaders. They were students again, facing rules they had once ignored. One afternoon, as the new girl packed her bag, someone from that group stopped nearby. They didn't speak. They just nodded once. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. She returned the nod calmly and walked away. The school felt safer now. Not perfect, but better. And though most students still didn't know who she really was, they understood something important. She was not weak. She never had been. And the final lesson was still coming. The final weeks of the school term passed more quietly than anyone expected. The hallways were calmer, and the loud laughter that once echoed through them had softened. Students moved with more awareness now, as if they understood that words and actions carried weight. The new girl continued her routine without change. She arrived on time, sat near the window, and focused on her work. She never acted like she had won something. She never brought attention to herself. That consistency made people respect her even more. One afternoon, a small incident happened in class. A student made a rude comment toward another, testing the room the way people used to test her. Before a teacher could step in, someone else spoke up and asked them to stop. The room went quiet. The new girl noticed and felt something shift inside her. Change was spreading, slowly but surely. After school that day, she walked past the notice board and saw a poster about a new student program focused on kindness and respect. Teachers were involved. Students were volunteering. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. At home, she talked more openly with her guardian that evening. Not about the bullies, but about the students who had shown courage. The guardian listened carefully and reminded her that real strength often inspires others without force. As the days passed, people began treating her differently, not with fear, with trust. Some asked for help with lessons. Others sat beside her during breaks. She welcomed them all the same way, calm and polite. One day, during a school assembly, the principal spoke about responsibility and respect. No names were mentioned. No stories were singled out. But everyone knew what had inspired the speech. The new girl sat quietly among the crowd. She didn't look around to see who was watching her. She focused on the words, understanding that change only mattered if it lasted. Later that week, a teacher asked her to help mentor a younger student who had been struggling to fit in. She agreed without hesitation. She remembered how lonely it felt at the beginning. During their first meeting, the younger student asked how she stayed so calm when people were unkind. The new girl smiled gently and said calmness was something you practiced, not something you were born with. That answer stayed with the student. Near the end of the term, a quiet moment revealed everything. During a parent meeting, a visiting adult recognized her last name on a document and reacted with surprise. The conversation stayed private, but curiosity grew. Soon, whispers returned, this time different from before. People spoke about her family background, about discipline, about legacy. Some finally connected the dots. She heard the whispers and chose silence again. She didn't deny the truth, but she didn't use it either. Her identity was not a weapon. It was simply part of who she was. On the last day of school, students gathered for final announcements. The atmosphere felt lighter. Some students laughed freely. Others hugged goodbye. Growth had taken place, quietly and without celebration. As she packed her bag, one of the former bullies stood nearby. There was hesitation, then a simple apology. No excuses, no long speech, just a few honest words. She listened, nodded once, and wished them well. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting, but it meant moving forward. Outside the school gates, the same simple car waited. As she stepped inside, she looked back at the building one last time. It had tested her. It had challenged her. But it had also changed. During the drive home, she reflected on everything she had learned. Silence was powerful. Calm was strength. And respect, once earned, could reshape an entire place. That evening, she stood by the window at home, watching the sun set. Her phone buzzed with messages from new friends. She smiled softly. She didn't need people to know who her grandfather was. She didn't need fame or recognition. Her character had spoken louder than any name ever could. And that was the lesson the school would remember long after she was gone.